Coming up today, the Islamic State militant group claims responsibility for the terrorist attacks in Brussels that killed more than 30 people and wounded about 230 others. President Park Geun-hye pledges to develop the newly created startup campus in Pangyo into a creative economy valley. Plus, Korea reports its first case of the Zika virus. The patient, a man in his 40s, had recently returned from a trip to Brazil. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, March 23rd here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom and you're tuned in to our early morning edition of Arirang News. We start, of course, with the latest on the deadly terror attacks in Brussels. The militant group that calls itself Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the blasts that killed more than 30 people and wounded more than 200 others. In a message written in Arabic and French on a website affiliated with ISIS, it said that it had carried out the attacks as revenge for Belgium's participation in the international coalition battling Islamic State. The statement also said the attacks were merely the beginning and the consequences would be devastating. Sources quoted by Reuters say the perpetrators seemed to be connected to the recently captured Salah Abdeslam, prime suspect in the Paris attacks. Now, hundreds of passengers were trying to check in at Zaventem Airport at around 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning when two explosions went off in the departure hall. Another explosion struck the Malenbeek station in the city close to EU buildings. A third bomb, an undetonated suicide vest, was found at the airport and secured by bomb experts. Officials say the suspects brought 3 bombs into the terminal, but one failed to go off. The airport has suspended all takeoffs and landings. In a rare joint statement, heads of the 28 EU member states denounced the attacks, calling them an attack on the open democratic society. They pledged to resolutely counter terrorism. Now, in other news and closer to home, a huge creative economy startup campus opened on Tuesday in Korea's main IT hub, the town of Pangyo, just south of the capital. Speaking at the opening ceremony, President Park Geun-hye said the complex would be a base camp, not just for Korean, but for foreign startups as well. Song Ji-sun reports.
Marking the opening of the huge startup support center, President Park started off by mentioning the Baduk or Go match between Lee Se-dol and AlphaGo last week, in which the Google-developed artificial intelligence program won 4-1. She said with the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, Korea must come up with creative ideas and innovative products to survive, which is what her administration has advocated for the past 3 years, with a national chain of 17 innovation centers that are now fully operational.
이제는 기존의 모방형 경제 성장 방식으로는 안 됩니다. 창의적 아이디어와 신기술을 결합한 창조 경제를 일으켜 세상에서 유일한 새로운 상품, 서비스, 기업을 만들어 내야만 무한 경쟁을 뚫고 살아남을 수 있습니다.
Housing over 200 startups, the Pangyo campus will cater specifically to tech companies in the fields of Internet of Things, cloud computing, big data, and mobile. And with additional facilities for international exchanges also planned, the creative economy valley will be complete by next year.
스타트업 캠퍼스가 우리 창업 기업과 세계 시장을 연결하는 관문이 되기를 바랍니다. 우리나라의 우수한 스타트업 생태계를 국제사회에 알리고 해외 투자자를 연결하는 든든한 가교 역할을 해주기를 바랍니다.
In addition to helping domestic startups expand overseas, the campus will also seek to attract prospective foreign startups through a competition to be held in the second half of the year. President Park pledged full support for fostering the new center as Asia's startup hub, where talented youth from abroad can gather to realize their dreams of launching innovative startups. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now, senior officials from South Korea and the United States have been discussing how to best implement sanctions on North Korea for its recent nuclear and missile provocations. They agreed to push for trilateral talks with China. Connie Kim with the details.
Pushing for trilateral talks involving the top nuclear envoys from South Korea, the U.S., and China to implement UN sanctions and bring progress in North Korea's nuclear issues. This is what South Korea's Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs Kim Hong-gyun and his U.S. counterpart Sang Kim agreed to during their second round of discussions in Seoul on Tuesday. The decision comes as China recently said it was open to three-way talks between the six-party representatives. The two nuclear envoys also saw eye to eye on cooperating to make Pyongyang acknowledge that denuclearization is its only choice. Both agreed that stern international measures should be handed down if the North carries out another provocation. Prior to the meeting, Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se met with Sang Kim and the State Department's coordinator for sanctions policy, Daniel Freed. Yoon called for Washington to continue its role in implementing the UN sanctions and putting all-out pressure on the reclusive regime. This was in line with high-level officials meeting on Monday, where senior South Korean and U.S. officials said they're giving their, quote, full vigor and energy to implementing the sanctions on North Korea. The U.S. nuclear envoy will continue the effort to build cooperation on implementing UN sanctions on Pyongyang when he travels to Vietnam and Cambodia this week, nations that have substantial relationships with North Korea. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter has revealed that South Korea and the United States have agreed to deploy the U.S. anti-ballistic missile system known as THAAD to the Korean Peninsula. Speaking at a House Armed Services Committee hearing on Tuesday, Carter said the system would protect South Korea and the U.S. troop presence here against North Korea's missile threats. The U.S. Defense Chief added that Washington has started to boost its capabilities in light of North Korea possibly having the capacity to range the U.S. with an intercontinental ballistic missile. Now, Washington also hopes to talk with China and address its concerns about the possible deployment. Rose Gottemiller, Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security, stressed that the U.S. and South Korea had just begun discussions and no decision had been made. She added that THAAD is only capable of defending the territory on which it's deployed and is not capable of the kind of reach China thinks it has. In exactly 3 weeks from now, South Koreans will head to the polls for a general election. The nation's major parties are releasing their list of candidates, but bit by bit, rather, as they struggle to contain feuds that have erupted over the course of their nomination process. Shin Se-min with the details.
Korea's political parties continue to feud over locking in their final list of candidates ahead of next month's general election. The ruling Saenuri Party's nomination committee is waiting on Yoo Sung-min to voluntarily withdraw from the process. Yoo, a political heavyweight who is not part of the pro-President Park Geun-hye faction, has been keeping a low profile for over a week now, at least during the nomination process. The board has postponed making an announcement on whether or not he will get a spot to run, and a regular party meeting scheduled for Tuesday evening, where it was expected to focus on Yoo, was cancelled last minute. Over on the opposition side, the Minju Party of Korea's interim leader Kim Jong-in is reconsidering his position as the party chief. Criticisms have boiled over the release of the main opposition's proportional representative list, which had Kim ranked as second for a seat. Party members denounced the move, which has led Kim to refuse to participate in party affairs since Monday. Speculation is swirling that the angered party chief may announce his resignation, but Kim has so far remained silent. Pundits say, however, that he will likely announce his stance on the position as the leader as early as Wednesday. Amid all this, the minor opposition People's Party released its latest batch of nominations. With the 2-day candidate registration period just around the corner, political parties are expected to wrap up and lock in their final set of nominations no later than Wednesday. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Korea confirmed its first case of the Zika virus on Tuesday. Health officials say the patient, a man in his 40s, had recently returned from a trip to Brazil. The government says it's already taking action to ensure the safety of the public. Ian Shin reports.
The first case of a Zika infection has been confirmed in Korea. The health ministry announced on Tuesday that a 43-year-old man who recently traveled to Brazil has tested positive for the mosquito-borne virus. He had returned to Korea 10 days ago after being gone for 22 days on business. 5 days after his arrival, he started showing signs of infection with a fever, followed by other symptoms including a rash and muscle pain. Currently, he's in a hospital recovering. Doctors say he has been receiving treatment for his symptoms, which are getting better.
Quarantining the patient was not necessary. However, considering this is the country's first case of a Zika infection, he was receiving special separate care at Jeonnam National University Hospital.
Officials are stressing that there's no need to panic since Zika is not an airborne disease like MERS, and it has an extremely low mortality rate. To be on the safe side, the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is taking preventative steps to block potential spread of the virus.
We have mosquito experts at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention who are already following through with mosquito larva control measures, and local city and provincial governments are on board as well.
The health ministry has also enacted other safeguards like disinfecting planes and using thermal body scanners at airports to monitor inbound travelers from South America for signs of fever. Health authorities said the patient is undergoing a second genetic test for official confirmation on his infection. Ian Shin, Arirang News.
Now, a flare-up of Ebola in Guinea has killed 5 people since December when the country was declared free of Ebola transmission. Health authorities on Tuesday confirmed 2 more deaths registered in recent days. Officials say more than 950 people may have come into contact with the victims. It's not yet known how the people had contracted the disease, though. Ebola has killed at least 11,300 people in West Africa since 2013 in the worst outbreak on record. US President Barack Obama delivered a speech in Havana on Tuesday, the third and final day of his historic trip to Cuba. Speaking at the Grand Theatre of Havana, Obama first expressed condolences to the victims of the Brussels terror attacks. He then said, by renewing relations with Cuba, he hopes to bury the last remnant of the Cold War. Obama said the US will lift its embargo on Cuba as a policy of isolation does not fit in the 21st century. Despite economic and political differences, Obama stressed common heritage between the countries and said they will soon begin cooperation in various fields such as agriculture, education and law enforcement. He also stressed the value of democracy and human rights and reconciliation between the US and Cuba. Seoul Fashion Week has pulled back the curtain and set up the catwalk for its 2016 Fall-Winter show. But behind all the glitz and glamour, the local fashion industry has lost some of its luster in recent years. Kim Min-ji has the details.
Korean designers will be presenting their latest collections at the Hera Seoul Fashion Week as they look to make a splash and win over global buyers. And this year, up-and-coming designers will be able to showcase their work following relaxed rules that open doors to more participants. Previously, designers were required to own a private brand for at least 5 years, but now the criteria has been lowered to just 1 year as the local industry aims to expand the arena for hardworking designers who are looking to get off the ground. Designer Kim Soo-jin, whose professional career has lasted for almost a decade now, says perseverance is key.
Despite starting with very little money, I would work during the day and make clothes overnight. For me, it was about keeping my pace. I didn't compare myself with other designers. I felt it was important to find a way that was right for me and take steps accordingly.
More and more Korean designers have made inroads into overseas markets, as well as taking part in internationally renowned fashion weeks. Designer Lee Ji-yeon, who was recently in New York, says Korean designers are getting more recognition and it's important that they are willing to accept change.
Fashion trends now circulate worldwide, so it's important not to pursue Korean traditional styles. Of course, we need to have our own style, but we also need to accept diversity.
But behind the perfect looks and dazzle of these designers, the local fashion industry has been in the shade, facing slowdown in the local economy and growing competition from overseas brands. In recent years, more than 24 fashion labels have gone out of business or filed for bankruptcy. Big names have been no exception. The country's leading fashion company saw their operating profit fall significantly in 2015 from a year ago.
Fashion companies in Korea tend to lack communication with consumers. Fashion trends no longer go from one country to another. Companies need to get out there and set new trends as well as keep up with trends that consumers are pursuing.
Experts say that although prospects for the local fashion industry aren't so rosy, aggressive marketing and more research into consumer and street trends could help Korea's designers get far, especially if they are able to hitch a ride on the popularity of Hallyu or the Korean wave. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Well, those are the stories we have for you at this hour on a Wednesday morning here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out the website arirang.com/news. Have a great day. Goodbye.